Good evening, everyone. Let us start. Let us resume with the topic that we had stopped the last time. That we had stopped on the last time. So today, our today's topic will be salient features of the Constitution. First of all, let us start with writing today's date. That is 20 November 11, 2023. My name is Faisali. चलिए शुरू करते हैं. Our topic for today is, first of all, basic important facts. Important facts regarding Constituent Assembly. First of all, 1. Seal of the Constituent Assembly was actually some members of the Constituent Assembly criticized that the making of the Constitution is taking a very long time. So the elephant represents that slow time, but actually the elephant represented solidity and strength of the Constitution. Now the second important fact is Sir Sir B. N. Rao B. N. Rao was the was the So B. N. Rao was legal advisor to the Constituent Assembly. Next important thing is H. V. R. Iyengar. He was the secretary to the Constituent Assembly. Fourth is S. N. Mukherjee. Chief Draftsman. Chief Draftsman of the Constituent Assembly. Fifth is Prem Bihari Narayan Raizada. Was the calligrapher. And the original Constitution was a very interesting art piece. It had paintings and pictures of many freedom fighters and important figures in the history of India. For example, Rani Lakshmibai. So, the Constitution was decorated by artists artists from Shanti Niketan, including Anandlal Bose, Beohar Ram Manohar Sinha. Seventh is the Hindi calligraphy of the Constitution was done by Vasant Krishna Vaidya. Now these are some important facts that we have to remember. Seal of the Constituent Assembly was Elephant, Sir B. N. Rao, legal advisor to the Constituent Assembly. Legal advisor means if there must have been some issue that if this particular thing will cause legal troubles or not. So this Sabian Rao was the man that was sought. His advice was sought on different matters. Next is HVR Iyengar, secretary. Next SN Mukherjee, chief draughtsman. Prem Bihari Narayan Raizada, calligrapher. It was decorated by artist. This name is very important. Nandlal Bose and Beor Ram Manohar Sinha. Hindi calligraphy was done by Vasant Krishna Vaidya. Now, the work for drafting the constitution was done by various assemblies. The most important assembly of the constitution of the most important committee. The drafting the constitution was done by various committees. The most important committee was headed by Dr. B.R. Ambedkar. Chairman of drafting committee. He is also called as father of the constitution. Father of the constitution. Next important thing is he is also called as modern Manu. Manu Rishi Manu was a lawmaker in ancient India. The writer of the text called as Manusmriti. Now let us discuss some important things that the Constituent Assembly had done. Whenever the Constituent Assembly met, it had two functions. Constituent Assembly had two functions. Two functions. Basically, the first logical thing is making of the constitution. And the second thing is, since at that time there was no parliament present, no representatives present in a parliament like institution. So Constituent Assembly was, though indirectly elected, it represented a representative institution of people. So Constituent Assembly also carried out the function of law making laws. Now these two functions had different chairmen. Whenever the Constituent Assembly met for this purpose was chaired by Dr. Rajendra Prasad. Now, and the whenever the Constituent Assembly met for the purpose of making laws, it was chaired by G.V. Mavlankar. Now, students, can you please tell me who is the first president and first speaker of independent India? Who was the first president of independent India? First president of independent India, Dr. Rajendra Prasad. First president. Now, these two functions were carried by the Constituent Assembly. Now, let us see what other function, what the other important things that were done by the Constituent Assembly. One, it ratified India's membership to the Commonwealth. In 1949. Now there must a question might arise. What is Commonwealth? You must have heard about Commonwealth Games. Commonwealth is nothing but an organization of former colonies. In the case of Commonwealth, we are a part of British Commonwealth. British Commonwealth are the countries. British Commonwealth are the countries that were colonies of Britain. The leadership of the Commonwealth is under the hands of Britain. It is headed by Britain. Second is the Constituent Assembly adopted the national flag. Another important thing done by the Constituent Assembly was it adopted the national anthem. National anthem, the Jana Gana Mana, was originally written in Bengali language. but its Hindi version forms the national anthem. Fourth is the Constituent Assembly also adopted national song in 1950. National song is Vande Mataram. Vande Mataram is a song that is taken from a novel written by Bankim Chandra Chatterjee. He wrote a novel. Mr. Bankim Chandra Chatterjee wrote a novel about Sannyasi rebellion. Sannyasis were nothing but renunciants or fakirs. It is also called as they are also called as fakir, and the rebellion is also called as fakir rebellion. Adopted Anandamath, a novel written by Bankim Chandra Chatterjee. The most important thing done by the Constituent Assembly was, as we all know, the first elections in the independent India took place in 1951-52. So, the first president was elected by the Constituent Assembly. Now, let us see the Constitution, the enactment of the Constitution. The Constitution was passed on the Constitution was passed on November 26, 1949. This is the date mentioned in the preamble. Now, originally, the Constitution contained original Constitution contained preamble. Now, this word is very important. Original Constitution This means that there were periodic changes taking place in the constitution. Now, these changes are done by the legislature. The parliament has the power to amend the constitution. Amend means to change or modify it, because the constitution should have the power to be able to change along with time. Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, the crux of one of his sentences was, there can be no finality in the constitution. If you put the seal of finality on the constitution, if you put the seal of finality on the constitution, you stop the development of people. There can be no development. For example, recently, 2 3 years back, a constitutional status was accorded to National Commission for Backward Classes. Similarly, the most famous thing that we all know about, everyone must be knowing about the GST. GST is the Goods and Services Tax. Originally, the constitution did not have this type of tax. It had sales tax and whatnot. But by 101st Constitutional Amendment Act, the chapter of GST was added in the constitution. The original constitution contained preamble, second, 395 articles, and 8 schedules. Current constitution now the current constitution contains preamble, it contains a preamble. The present constitution contains 448 articles and 12 schedules. The constitution is divided into 25 parts. Now, one more thing. This is very important. This can be asked in CLAT or any competitive exams. The preamble was enacted after the entire constitution was adopted. What this means is preamble the preamble was the last thing that was added in the constitution. Ironically, the preamble is the first thing you see when you open the constitution. Now let us move forward to enforcement. 26th November is the date of is the date on which the Constitution was adopted and enacted. But 26th November, 26th January 1950 is the date used for is the date of commencement of the Constitution. And provisions were enforced on 26th November 1949. These provisions including these provisions included citizenship, citizenship and elections and temporary provisions, etc. The remaining part was enforced on January 26, 1950. Now, this date is very important. January 26, 1950 is also called as Republic Day. Now, why was this date adopted? January 26, 1950 is also the date of commencement. This is very important. In any Supreme Court judgment or order or writ, you will find that this word has been mentioned, commencement of the Constitution. So, commencement means when the Constitution had come into force. January 26 was selected because on this day the the Purna Swaraj Declaration was adopted because of Purna Swaraj Day. Because of Purna Swaraj Day. Purna Swaraj Day was held in after the after the Lahore session in December 1949. Sorry, 1929. Pune Swaraj Day. January 26 was selected for its historic significance, where it was it was a day where flag was hoisted on the banks of river Ravi by Jawaharlal Nehru. Now let us see the criticism of the Constituent Assembly of the Constituent Assembly. One is, it was not a representative body. As I had already said in the previous lectures, the Constituent Assembly was not elected on the basis of universal adult franchising. This was a body that was made up of representatives that were elected on the basis of limited franchisee. Not everyone had the right to vote. There were certain qualifications. Like for example, just for our understanding, the ones who are paying income tax of 10,000 or more can stand up or vote for the election. Then we had also seen that in the Constituent Assembly, in the elections for the Constituent Assembly, the seats were divided on the basis of community. It was divided on communal lines. So this was not a representative body. Second argument of the critics was it was not a sovereign body. Actually, the word sovereign means it has the power to take care of its own affairs. But the Constituent Assembly was made on the basis of British Parliament's Act. So this is why this criticism was there. But as we have seen, the Constituent Assembly had the power to adopt any law that it wanted. One more thing, the last viceroy, Lord Mountbatten, was present during that time. Lord Mountbatten. Third is time consuming. Time consuming. Actually, the making of our constitution was a very lengthy affair. The making of the constitution took almost 3 years. To be precise, 2 months, 2 years, 11 months, and 18 days. This was because nowhere in the world such a huge population was going towards democracy. And to make the constitution for India, which was a very diverse country with many languages many different kinds of people was not an easy affair. Dr. B.R. Ambedkar proudly claimed the Constituent Assembly that the Constitution of India has been made after ransacking 64 constitutions of the world of different countries. So it was not just a copy and paste affair. The Constituent Assembly debated each and every provision, and almost every provision was adopted on the basis of consensus. Consensus, not majority vote. Consensus means make taking almost everyone together. Not like 51% are voting for the yes part and 49% are waiting for the no part. Time consuming. It took 2 years, 11 months, and 18 days to frame the constitution. Next important thing is the next criticism of the Constituent Assembly was Congress dominated by congressmen. As we have already seen in our previous lectures, that Indian National Congress won 2086 out of 296 seats. So during that time, Congress had the majority representation. So this is very normal thing that if many people are voting for some particular party, that party will be having a dominance in the legislature. Now, let us move forward with the last criticism. The last criticism of the Constituent Assembly was it was dominated by lawyers. Actually, if you see at the background of many freedom fighters, for example, Jawaharlal Nehru, he was a lawyer. Even Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel was a lawyer. Gandhiji was also a lawyer. So the words so sorry, it was dominated by lawyers. So this is very logical because most of the freedom fighters were lawyers, and this is reflected in the words included in the constitution, like commencement and many other words. So that is why the any matter has to go to the Supreme Court on the basis of interpretation. The recent thing in news is regarding the role of governor. So Actually, this is very tricky part. The governor is the official head of the governor is the head of the state government, is the and he's also a representative of the center. So many terminologies in the constitution require fine knowledge about the legal aspects. And for cracking the CLAT exam, we also need to have a basic understanding about legal terminologies and English language. So that is why whenever we are proceeding forward, we take we focus on the words like sovereign, and which I also try to explain it to you. Actually, the time consuming affair. One member of the Constituent Assembly used to call the drafting committee as drifting committee. Now, the word drifting means something that proceeds very slow. So, as the constitution making is taking very vast amount of time, very vast amount of time. So, it is also called as contempt by contempt. By contempt means not in a positive light. It was also called as drifting committee. Now, we are focusing on two things. First is polity and the vocabulary. Out of contempt. Now, the one more term is there, contempt of court. Contempt of court means doing something that goes against the direction issued by the court. And here, contempt means in a negative light. In a negative light. This is all for today. Now, let us give a very fast review of what all we have done today. The seal of the Constituent Assembly was elephant. And some members of the Constitution jokingly said that element is very appropriate because the amount of time that the Constituent Assembly is taking. Subbian Rao was the legal advisor to the Constituent Assembly. Next is H.V.R. Younger. He was the secretary to the Constituent Assembly. Next is S.N. Mukherjee. He was the chief draftsman. Prem Bihari Narayan Raizada was the calligrapher. The original constitution was written by hand. It was also an art piece because it was decorated by artists from Shantiniketan. Shantiniketan is a school that is associated with Rabindranath Tagore, including the artists included Nandalal Bose and Biohar Ram Manohar Sinha. Hindi calligraphy was done by Vasant Krishna Vaidya. Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, the most towering personality in the Constituent Assembly. He was the chairman of the drafting committee. He is also called as father of the constitution. He is also called as modern Manu. Constituent Assembly had two functions: the constituent function and the legislative function. Legislative. Here, constituent function. It was chaired by Rajendra Prasad, who is also the first president. Important events: it ratified India's Commonwealth membership in 1949. What is British Commonwealth that I have already explained. It also adopted the national flag in 1947. It adopted the national anthem, which is a Hindi version of Jan Gan Man. National song, Vande Mataram in 1950, adopted from Anandamath. We had seen the enactment of the constitution. It was adopted and enacted on 26th November 1949. The original constitution contained a preamble, 395 articles, and 8 schedules. The current preamble contains the current constitution contains preamble, 448 articles, and 12 schedules. Preamble was enacted after the constitution. This is very important. The enforcement, some were enforced on 26 November 1949. Some were enforced on 26 January on account of the Pune Swaraj Day. Then we have seen the criticism of the Constituent Assembly. It was not a representative body. This I have explained in detail. The sovereign body, this also I have explained in detail. But this is not, these criticisms are not very appropriate because it was a very diverse body. It was a time consuming body and dominated by Indian National Congress.